So a lot of couples struggle with unwanted pornography in their relationship. Typically, the pattern that happens is you have a husband, not always, but most of the time, who's looking at pornography, typically in seasons of his life when he's feeling stressed or lonely or depressed or overwhelmed or anxious. And he'll use that pornography to self soothe and to escape. And that pornography goes against his value system and the value system of his marriage. And so he decides that maybe it's best just to hide it. And so he'll hide it because he feels ashamed and embarrassed. And he might even be afraid that if his partner finds out, that she'll want to divorce him and he won't be able to see his kids again, or he'll lose his marriage. And he doesn't want that to happen. So he just hides it. And then eventually his partner finds out and she feels hurt, obviously, and upset and confused and in some cases betrayed. And it can lead to this whole host of negative, frustrating, disconnecting conversations where couples are just trying to find an answer or a solution or some way to save their relationship and feel like they're on some sort of stable footing again. This is a big problem in the community that I grew up in. I see it happen a lot, and it's really heartbreaking to see something like pornography ruin an otherwise awesome marriage. So I decided I wanted to kind of create a resource for this. So I've been working on a project recently over the last couple of months with some friends of mine. One is Kristen Hodson, who's been on the show many times before. We did an entire season together. She's an ASIC certified sex therapist. And her colleague, Doug Braun-Harvey, the co-author of the book, Treating Out of Control Sexual Behavior, Rethinking Sex Addiction. He also is on the show, along with me and my friends Jake and Hans, who are just two other regular guys who have dealt with pornography in the past. I think that the most frustrating thing about these conversations that most couples get stuck in is after pornography use has been disclosed and it is contrary to the value system of the relationship, what typically happens is the focus is put on the person who's watching the porn to stop watching it. And then their partner, all they have to do is like hold their breath and hope that it doesn't happen again and kind of wait for it to happen again. And it causes a lot of anxiety and tension and confusion. And it's really hard to rebuild trust and connection in an atmosphere like that. And so the goal of these conversations is to model what it could look like to have a more productive conversation about the consumption of sexual imagery. And I think they're really powerful conversations, and I wanted to share this first one with you to kind of give you a taste. And if you want more, you can go to rethinkingpornaddiction.com. And just one last disclaimer. If you do have young people around that you don't want hearing about pornography, this might be a good episode to listen to with your headphones in or at some other time when they're not in the room. There's nothing overtly explicit that we talk about, but they are a little bit more of an adult theme. So I just wanted to give you that fair warning. Hope you enjoyed this episode. It's one of the most meaningful conversations that I've had in a very long time, and I hope that comes through as you listen to it. All right, we're officially live. This is our first ever Rethinking Pornography, Porn Addiction phone call. So first of all, we can see all of your chats in the comments. So if you're watching live, feel free to comment and communicate with us. We're happy to chat with you. And I want to start off this call because it's our very first conversation by introducing everybody who's here. Maybe we can each take just like 30 seconds and say who we are and where we are from. So my name is Nate Bagley, and my job here in this sphere, I run a podcast called Growth Marriage, and I'm a marriage educator. And I'm kind of trying to play the liaison between the normal guy who I am and the clinical side of things. And we'll introduce our clinicians in just a minute. But I'm really passionate about marriage. I sit on the Utah Marriage Commission, and I speak and teach about marriage as my full-time job. And so pornography is a struggle that I myself have dealt with in my life. And it's also something that people who follow my work ask me about all the time. Hey, my husband's struggling with porn, or somebody's dealing with porn, or I've been betrayed by my partner who's experiencing porn. Help. And I haven't had a good resource to point them to. And this is part of the reason that I wanted to participate in this specific group, is to help provide resources. So that's a little bit of context as to who I am. Jake, do you want to share who you are?
Yeah, I'm Jake Hodson. I am passionate about families. I currently lead a family of 5. I am married to Kristen, and that's where
his audio is not doing great.
I think I represent. Did I go?
Yeah, you cut out a little
Hans,
bit.
go ahead. Why don't you take it away?
All right.
We'll come back to Jake. We'll come back to Jake when he's not trapped outside his office.
I'm Hans. Nice to meet everyone that's here or that's not here. We're glad to have whoever's here. I'm grateful to be in the group. By trade, I work in the construction industry, but that's not who I am by a long shot. I have a family of 5, also 3 kids, an amazing wife. I'm friends with the people on the screen here. I'm grateful for amazing relationships in life. And if I were to talk about what my passions are in life, it would be building strong village and helping myself and others to find peace and quality of life. And that's why I'm here, really, because I've at times struggled with pornography or the effects of it in my life also. And I love the idea of being able to potentially help others through that painful time or pain point.
Awesome. Should we keep going around the circle and hit Kristen?
Sure. So I'm Kristen. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified sex therapist, but other parts of my life is I'm a mom and I'm a partner. And I would say in Utah, so much of my work has been around pornography and visual imagery. And I have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people around this issue and people trying to solve what this problem in their life. Like, how do I approach it? What do I do? And there's a lot of public conversation, like big dialogue around it. And what I find is you get some really wonderful conversations when they're more one-on-one and can really distill down into the individual. I am thankfully friends with everyone here as well and have professional relationship with Doug. And I think we've all been having these one-on-one conversations about pornography. And so I think it became a natural opportunity of what happens if we come together and have these conversations together. So I'm super excited to be starting, hopefully, the beginning of many conversations to start rethinking what this can look like.
And I'm Doug Braun-Harvey. I'm in San Diego, and so I live in California, and the rest of the folks live in Utah. And so I love being a guest to this wonderful group of folks. I'm a therapist who has retired after 40 years of doing psychotherapy, and now I write and teach and train on sexual health, and particularly sexual health issues related to people's relationship with their sexual lives and their sexual behavior. But that's, again, I love that that's not all of me, right? I have spent my entire adult life in San Diego. I've been in a relationship for 33 years with my partner, Al. And I also have spent a great deal of my life being interested in helping men align their lives, who they be, sexual human being on the planet. And I hope this conversation we're going to be having together is a way for men to find a way to hear some of the ideas we're all going to talk about together without having to pay the high price of admission of possibly, hurting and injuring somebody they love because they didn't know how to talk about something that was a real conflict in their lives. And so I really hope all of us reach some people who are really looking for some help to how to enter really tough conversations.
Beautifully said, Doug.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect segue into the whole premise of this show. Would you guys mind if I start off by sharing a little bit of just my experience with porn?
No, please.
This is obviously a group conversation, but I feel like giving context to the pain is a really good place to start because I think it's something that most people can relate to. So I remember just growing up, like the first time that I started discovering like the amazing feelings that came with looking at something sexual. It was like the Sears catalog. And I opened it up to the lingerie section and I was like, oh my gosh, boobs. Like, this is amazing, looking at the lingerie. And I would like hide those catalogs under my bed and like was totally ashamed and embarrassed of it. And just for context, for everybody who's watching, all three of me, Jake, and Hans all come from a conservative, religious Christian background. Like, we were all raised in conservative, religious Christian homes, and there was a lot of stigma and judgment around this specific stuff. And I remember growing up hiding this from people, hiding the fact that there were things that I would look at that I really enjoyed, and I would do it in secret. And there was a sense as I grew and got older and started dating and got into, even in my 20s, there was a part of me that thought like, if somebody finds out that I am doing this, I am going to be in big trouble. Like, my parents are going to be upset with me. They might be disappointed. My religious leaders are going to be disappointed that I'm not the person they thought I was. Maybe the girls that I was trying to date wouldn't want to date me. I would be unlovable. I felt unworthy before God. I felt like anybody that could be let down would be let down if they found out that I was looking at pornography behind closed doors and like hiding this. And it was like, it caused me so much anxiety and so much dread and so much worry. And fast forward now, I work full time helping couples create extraordinary marriages. And I don't think a week goes by where I don't get a message from somebody, whether it's a man or a woman, saying, I'm dealing with this and I can't stop and I need help and I don't know what to do. I keep looking at pornography and it's not something I want to do, but I keep looking. Or a wife who's like, I just found out my husband's been looking at pornography for the last 15 years. He started when he was 12 and he kept this as a secret from me and I feel so betrayed. And I see these couples, they're just like reeling from this secret. They wonder like if they can trust again, if they're worthy of love, if they can repair their marriage. And it breaks my heart. It really does. And so I have plenty of experience with it. And then I have like secondary experience just working with couples. And I'm like, there needs to be a resource to show people how to have conversations about this and how to deal with it in a healthy way. And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Nate, what's interesting about your story to me is when you talk about, and this is where I think people are so curious of what's in between, is because you talk about where you were and where you are now. I think you have a very different relationship with visual imagery and like the conflict that I think was once so prevalent. At least from what I know of you, is it's totally different. And I think the in between of like, how did you even get to that spot? What does that even look like? What were the conversations you had to have? What were some of the, not only conversations with the people around you, but with yourself? And I don't know, like with Hans and Jake, if you resonate with Nate's story, but I think the in between is really intriguing for people. Like, how did you get there?
Yeah.
While Nate was talking, I thought he was actually telling my story. Like he had transported back into my 12-year-old life also and was telling my exact story. And I have thought a lot about this conversation leading up to it. And Nate, I think you said a word or two earlier that really resonated with me about where I'm at right now with regard to just being in this room with you guys and with the other people that are here. For me, I think really one of the incredible transitions that I went through was just the idea, and it relates to pornography or sexual imagery as well as other things, is just the idea of finding a space to be able to even have a conversation around it or look at it or just hold space for what that is and be able to examine it in some way.
Yeah, there's not spaces where I never experienced a space growing up where I talk about it without judgment.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to interject here. The word "it" has been said about 30 times in the last 4 minutes. So this is what I get to do. So I want you to tell me what you mean by it. What is this it that you keep talking about?
Porn.
Doug and Kristen, you've educated us well enough. Yes, the words porn or pornography, and I mean, my understanding of it or my relationship with this has changed enough that sexual imagery is now, for me, a more fitting term to the topic that we're talking about. But porn and pornography is really where.
Okay,
but I want to add one other thing because I want the audience to be clear here.
Yeah.
You're saying you looked at sexual imagery, Nate, with that big smile going back to 12 years old and telling us about this. Was there any sexual contact with your body while you were doing this? Or did you just look at pictures and that's all you did? There was absolutely no solo sex, no touching on one's body. It was just looking at pictures. Is that what we're talking about here?
When I was that young, yeah.
Okay, so the pictures started before masturbation.
Yep.
This is an important part of the story. When people talk about sexual imagery, they often don't talk about the fact that it was accompanied by self-pleasure, masturbation. I just want to encourage that to be just something you think about as we go forward talking. That's all.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
So the people watching don't feel so alone.
Well, I love that, Doug, and I want to gloss over. Or I don't want to gloss over this other thing that Hans pointed out as well. So Hans is already adjusting his language a little bit, and will you speak to a little bit, because I think when we're having this conversation about pornography addiction, I think it's important to understand that the words have power and the words that we use have specific meaning. And Doug, I would love if you could kind of help us clarify what people mean when they say pornography addiction or what they don't mean. Like, can you help us clarify the language there?
Well, Nate, my Minnesota etiquette where I was raised is just screaming at me right now. And I don't feel like I want to do that until Jake gets a chance to introduce
Yes.
himself.
Now we have Jake
so
back.
All five of us are in the room. And so
Thank you.
Is that okay? I just didn't feel
100%.
right. Okay.
Okay. I'm Jake. I'm a partner to Kristen. I have audio and internet now. This is fantastic. Thank you for your patience. I think I kind of like everyone else, I represent sort of the normal conservative upbringing who then has to start to rethink and retrain his programming around the messaging I received when I was younger versus the knowledge I received when I was older. So that's by way of my introduction. And before we go back to Doug to sort of educate us a little bit more, I think it's very telling that even the three of us on the top row here have had ample discussions about this and time to start to sort of approach our thinking around it. But I think it's telling that us who've been doing this for a little while now still refer to it as it, that we're not even comfortable saying pornography or sexual imagery or whatever the correct terminology is. And I think that is, for me, the reason why I'm here is because I felt such a deep shame around something that I didn't understand and I didn't have enough knowledge to understand. And it sort of, coalesced and sort of created this own little thing inside of me that was really terrible. And it wasn't until later on that as I started to look at it differently and started to think about it more critically and just explore the option of, the sort of science behind it and the normalcy behind it, that it helped me to be more comfortable with myself. And so that's, in a nutshell, why I'm here. I don't have the education or the background or I don't teach marriage classes. But for me, this was so helpful for me to come from a place of deep rooted shame and fear and wanting to hide myself to a place where I could accept myself and accept my story and how I came to be me. So that's me.
It's awesome, Jake. Two things that you didn't say expressly, but that stood out to me when you were talking are things that have resonated with me and that still resonate with me. One of them is that I'm still 100% on a journey of life. Like, we're in a room with Doug and Kristen talking about porn or sexual imagery or pornography addiction, sexual behavior. But I'm still fully in that experience of learning and understanding that about myself and about my partner, my wife, and how that all interacts. And so I'm still to be here to learn myself. I love just being with you guys in the room and talking about it. And then I want to really also acknowledge the the transitions and the pain that I've felt going from where I was to where I am now. And not that I'm at the end or anywhere near any kind of end or any kind of finality around anything related to sex. But at some point, I guess I went through some pain myself, and I did go through some pain myself, and those around me did also. And I want to just acknowledge the people that are either here or you guys also that have been through that. And the fact that we can sit here and talk about it means a ton to me, because there was a time and space in my life where I couldn't talk about it with anybody. And now I'm just grateful that I've got enough relationships around me like you guys and others that I actually can talk about this and learn about it and continue on that journey that I'm on to figure out how to have an amazing life.
So Hans, could you just take us to one moment that people listening might be interested in? What made you want to start having some sort of discussions about your use of imagery and solo sex and masturbation? Because all three of you have this common link of it was a secret. It was not to be spoken of. It was shameful. It was terrifying. And so now look at, you're sitting here on an online program. So, I'm kind of interested in this interesting moment that some people tuning in may have had. Like, they're kind of interested in just talking about it. That's it. And they might be sitting here going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting on this show." So get us there. Why would you want to start talking about this? Why didn't you just stay with your secret?
Thanks, Doug. I'm interested to hear what Jake and Nate have to say also. Recollecting back to my life and my journey and where I've been. The word shame was mentioned earlier. And I feel a lot of that in my past and sometimes in my current state still. And I somehow had enough bump-ins, I'm going to call them bump-ins, run-ins, whatever it might be, touch points with other things in life or other people in life that help me to see, okay, there's shame that I'm dealing with and pain that I'm dealing with. And somewhere there's a space where I can maybe move to where there's not shame around this. I'm fumbling here, I guess, but
no, don't judge yourself.
Okay.
Because Hans, this is what men do when they start to explore and find words for these things. They do beautifully, and then the judgmental voice comes in and starts editing you like a theater critic. And I'm not interested in that. Just keep going. Right. Just keep going.
I think maybe there was a point of hope, and I don't know at what exact moment that was, but there was a touch point where I saw something on the other side of the pain that I was dealing with and living in that I wanted to move towards. And I knew from where I was to where I am now, there was a difficult transition to go through and a difficult space to go through. But for some reason, there was enough hope or enough absence of shame at some place in the future that I wanted to get to that point. And so I think I just had enough nudges in life to be able to move from a really difficult place when it came to porn and sexual imagery to a place where I am now. And that's on the journey still.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. It feels really good to think back on that, Doug, and to try to understand where that transition started and where it's going and where it is now. Jake, Nate, I'm interested in the same question for you guys. Was there some moment where you really kind of had clarity around, okay, I got to get through this, or I want to work through this? Or I'm curious what your guys' experience was also, or is.
Jake has that smile.
He does.
Go ahead, Jake.
The audience, we've worked together enough that we know when that looks on Jake's face, we want to talk to him.
I don't think I had a moment of clarity, perhaps, as much as mine was more of I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was raised in the system. We didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about sexual health. We didn't talk about pleasure. We talked a lot about the pitfalls of sex. We talked a lot about the potential harm that could come and all of these other things. And that was the introductory message to me concerning sexuality and sexual health and pornography, sexual imagery, and all of these things. I then married Kristen, who just chose this path. And I remember laying in bed and she would tell me these facts and these interesting things. And even then, it was still very hard.
Can I time out you? Is that okay for one moment, like as partner to partner?
Okay.
Is it okay if I share? I feel like this would be helpful because it was actually a distinct moment. And I don't know if you remember, we were laying in bed. It was because there was a scramble. And I think this is relevant because I think couples will resonate because there's such a strong label. If you have any involvement with visual imagery, no matter if you're engaging with it once a week, once a month, and you feel conflicted and you can't stop, by default, you are an addict.
Yeah.
If we don't want to go here, I just feel like this is a really important part of your story and looking at it and being like, what would it mean? Like, what if you're not an addict? What is this? That was the question of curiosity that kind of, there was space to explore of, if you're not an addict, but there's this relationship with masturbation and or visual imagery, like, what is that? What?
Right.
And that,
Are you specifically speaking of sexual imagery? That he wasn't watching, the Golden Girls.
right. Sexual
Yeah, okay, all right.
that was the question that was
Hey, different strokes for different folks, man.
that honestly changed. What if you're not an addict, then what is this? And it created a whole different set of questions and curiosity and path.
But, Kristen, what do you want Jake to talk about regarding that moment? Because you're remembering it; it's palpable.
Totally.
What are you wanting Jake to talk about that moment as well to see if he remembers it and what it was like for him?
It's a good question, Doug. It's a good question. I just
I don't know if you were both there. That's why I'm curious.
From my perspective, that was a profound moment of when Jake was open to like, maybe I'm not an addict and maybe there's room for this to be something else. That's my recollection as your partner, Jake.
Yeah, but we had to go through all the other processes beforehand, all the other available options, which were none at the time. Right?
No, there were plenty. We went through them.
No, but they were all addiction treatment. There was never any education of like, hey, guess what? This is normal.
Can you tell us the story, Jake, before you got to the other options? What did you check out?
Well, okay, so going back, like looking at my history, we were pretty newlyweds. Like, I can't remember how into our marriage we were. And I was at, this could be like a long story. I don't, like what?
And share your comfort level too.
Conflict that I had this involvement. I had a relationship with sexual imagery and solo sex, and it was bad. It was viewed bad by everyone I knew at that point in time. Period.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I was in a process of merging my life with someone else, and truly, we are at our best when, And so there was this thing that I had that I was hiding, and it was eating me up inside. So I think I started to get a little bit more reckless with my behavior, not in, doing crazier things, but in leaving my emails open or whatever, because I didn't like the position I was in and I didn't know how to address it. I had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And so eventually I left, I think my phone open or a computer open, and Chris saw some emails, and they had like benign pictures. I mean, literally going back to it, it was like, would you agree, Chris? Like, this is fairly benign on like the spectrum and scale. But again, coming from where this is bad, you can interject at any time. It was like, this is a deal breaker. Like, we're talking about divorce suddenly. And then it was like, okay, no, but we have to get you in a treatment program. And so next thing I know, I'm sort of, head down, shuffling into like a 12-step program. I went for a little bit that was offered by the church. Paid a ton of money on another addiction treatment center thing, and it was like I would be in these meetings with these other guys, and some of these guys.
Jake, I want to interrupt for a minute. When I hear ton of money, I have a feeling there's somebody out there that wants to know how much money you spent.
I mean, when you're young, how do I
No. How much money did you spend on a treatment center?
I don't.
I know.
How much was it?
We paid at least 10 to 15,000 because not only did you have to go, but I had to go.
So, and that was the thing with this treatment center. It was like all of this stuff that is sort of continuing this narrative that like, you're broken, this is bad, you've screwed up, and you've damaged yourself and your partner, which was equally as hard, right? Like there's no hope. There's no like feeling of, good, see you on the other side. They're telling me you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life, and you have to maintain constant vigilance and all of this other stuff. And you're just sitting there going, like, just being defeated before you can even start. Then I go in this room with these other guys, and I still, love those guys and everything like that. But I'm realizing, like, wait, I don't have an addiction to pornography. Like some of these guys, like it's what they did. And I think there are people that have compulsions that they can't control, and it can get like really, really, really out of hand. And I also think there's a lot of us like, these guys and me that it's not. It's just sort of this natural progression of humanity and sexuality and curiosity, but there's no information behind it. There's no education behind it. There's nothing but, for me in particular, fear and shame and control, which was a terrible place to reside in. So after we did the treatment center, then we went through different counseling. And I think that's kind of when there was more of these aha moments of, wait a second, I am not that. I am not this addict that is, lurking in the shadows, that is this terrible miscreant that needs to hide himself from society, but that I'm just a regular dude. And as I learned more about that, and then having these conversations, it just helped chip at all that shame that accumulated over the years. To realize, one, that I'm not alone, two, that actually I am probably more than norm. I mean, if we got a bunch of got guys together in a room that were from the same sort of background, a lot of us would probably have a really, really similar story. I will also say that I did have some core issues that were sort of helping steer me in that direction.
Yeah.
And that became sort of an easy outlet or whatever else. But the imagery itself and the solo sex and all that other stuff, that was never, like, as soon as I started to address my core issues, and as soon as I started to get to a place of ownership and to communicate more with my partner and to establish open communication and acceptance and understanding, then those core issues started to dissipate, and my experience with it also started to dissipate. It's very interesting in that regard. So that's my whole life story.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Jake. So once again, the group got affirmed that when we see this look on your face, you have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Can I maybe share two? I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I have just in the back of my mind, or in the front of my mind even, have had two stories kind of that are intertwined that I think are going to hopefully illustrate the journey that I went on, and that I think we are on, and the others are on also. And that is Jake and Chris and I have been friends for a long, long time. And when Jake and Chris were going through that moment of crisis, I would call myself one of Jake's best friend. And I was oblivious to it. Like, I knew there was some disruption. I knew there was some struggle, but there was no way to, there was no conversation about it. There was no talk about it. There was no insight to that. And now I can sit in a room with Jake and Nate and Chris and Doug, and I can actually have a conversation about it. And being able to go from that place of one of my best friends was struggling with something very similar to what I had struggled with, and not being able to talk about it at all is striking to me. And then I'm going to fast forward / jump back. But a couple of months ago, I was watching the show The Sandlot with my kids. And there's a scene in The Sandlot where boys are at the swimming pool.
Wendy Peppercorn.
That's right. Wendy Peppercorn. I can't remember her name. But there's all the hot high school girls in the bathing suits, and the boys are super excited, and the one guy gets to kiss the lifeguard. And Squints, that's right. So after that scene was over, my 8-year-old boy says, "Hey, Dad, my penis got hard and I was feeling excited. Like, that was kind of strange." And so he had a physical reaction to imagery that he saw, right? To the show that he saw.
Everything's working fine.
Yes, we're working fine, which is the same physical reaction that I had at that age and that I still have today.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, seeing that sexual imagery, and having a physical reaction to it, and him expressing some kind of curiosity and some kind of wonderment and some kind of pleasure by it, and it not being, I mean, it was just something that we could interact about. But at some point in life, it goes from being able to express curiosity about that and being able to say, wow, what's going on with my body when I see that, to a place where I can't even talk about those feelings or that physical reaction with one of my best friends. Like, there was a lot of darkness, a lot of conflict, a lot of shame between what my son experienced and me not being able to talk with my best friend about a really significant pain point. And so trying to think back and trying to think forward about how to navigate that space and give people the ability to understand or have enough space around them to be able to say, this is a physical reaction that my body has, and to be able to have a conversation about it is really incredible for me. And I love that I can say it with you guys now and talk about it. And it wasn't that way. And if my son heard me say something like, hey, that's really cool what you went through, but you can't talk about it. Like, don't ever mention that to anybody. That's really bad. That's terrible. What just happened there? You saw some sexual imagery and your body reacted to it. That wouldn't be a place where I could have, I mean, that's not something that would happen to him, but somehow we get programmed in life or through values or through society that we can't talk about it. And I love that we actually can. And I hope that we can keep doing that for people. Yeah, Chris, sorry.
Well, no, I think you're coming full circle to, like, why is talking about sex or sexual health or sexual responses or desires or curiosities or pleasures or sexual imagery, like, why our question for this show is, why is this such a problem?
Yeah.
Why does it cause so much pain?
Like,
why does it go from something being so innocent to being something that's like, if you do this, we're getting a divorce because I can't stand to even be with you anymore?
I have a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When adults feel completely incompetent, they're not real effective.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Where do adults get any information, training? Look what the stories are here. These are you're wonderful people, and you didn't know how to have these conversations. You grew up in families that didn't know how to have these conversations. So I like to have empathy for the lack of literacy in this nation. And this is what it looks like when something so important that's unavoidable in everyday life, unavoidable, and we have no confidence in how to speak of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to hurt people before we get access to people who will help us with it.
Okay. This is one of those Doug moments where you need to repeat what you said, because that last phrase, I think people listening need to hear that.
Well, it's the story you all three have talked about, and even Kristen talked about, and being a partner of somebody, is these conversations finally start happening because somebody feels hurt. We have to wait till somebody feels hurt. Otherwise, we just stay in the treatment plan you all described. I call them your treatment plan of a 12-year-old. The 12-year-old comes up with a treatment plan, and they know darn well at 12 years old, I can't speak of this. And that treatment plan doesn't change until something worse happens.
Doug, can I highlight and underscore that right there? In terms of treatment plan, when you have a 12-year-old and all of you identified like, oh, this is a problem. You may have picked up on messages in a variety of ways, like overt or subtle, but somewhere along the line, it was like, oh, this is a problem. Like, this is bad. And the treatment plan is secrecy and hiding it. Like, that's the best you can do to manage what's going on, is like, don't say a word. And that's how I'll stay safe. That's how I'll still stay safe. And at the root for a lot of people is, how do I stay safe? Like, Jake, you didn't want to lose everything. You didn't want to lose your family and life. Like, my treatment plan is this: I have to stay safe. So
you keep it a secret.
You didn't like the conflict you were in either, of like hiding. You didn't like that, but you were kind of in a predicament of, well, if I share this, I lose everything. I hate being secretive, but underscoring what Doug has said is, people come up with their own treatment plans because it's not readily accessible or able to be talked about. And so people do the best they can do trying to manage the situations they're in.
Okay, so I want to fast forward to the moment then. Let's contrast that with Hans's moment with his 8-year-old.
Yes.
So Hans, tell us what you did when your son told us that, because all these men out there listening, or all these parents listening, are going, my God, what did his face look like? What did he say? Because that's what everybody's afraid of. Oh my God, my son's telling me about his erection. What do I do?
And the peppercorn comes on and you fast forward or you pause, you're like, we're taking that scene out.
Right. So Hans, slow it down. Take us there.
Okay.
You were in a place you would have never imagined 5 years ago.
No, absolutely not.
Right. So where were you?
Where was I physically? Is that?
Yeah, where were you physically? And then what did your face look like? Did you say anything? Just
set the stage.
Set the stage.
Yeah. So we were at home. I believe my wife was working or was out on a girls' night, maybe. I can't remember. And it was myself and our 11-year-old daughter and our 8-year-old son and our 4-year-old. And I was sitting on the floor, and they were sitting on the floor on our couch next to me. And we watched the scene, and then my son said what he said. And I did have a visceral physical reaction of, I don't know, a mix of confusion, a mix of uncertainty, a mix of embarrassment of, oh, my boy is telling me about his erection. And I felt all those experiences at the same time. And then I had enough moment of clarity to think, what should my reaction be here? And so I actually paused the show and I said, hey, tell me more about that. Like, what did it feel like? Did you like it? How did you experience that? And I don't know if I use those exact words, but just tell me more about it. And he said, yeah, I had butterflies in my stomach and it was kind of exciting. And I felt a little bit of just excitement. And I said, that's really cool, buddy. Isn't that interesting? That's what our bodies do. You saw something that was exciting to you and your body had this kind of cool reaction where you felt good and you felt energized and you felt some butterflies about it. And it was kind of exciting, right? And he said, yeah, that was kind of cool. And then my 11-year-old daughter also said the same thing. She said, oh, Dad, I had butterflies too. Like, I felt some excitement also. And I said, that's really cool. That's your body doing what it is made and programmed to do. And you're going to experience that through life. And you're going to feel those moments where you're excited about something, whether it's someone you're kissing or whether it's something that you see. You're going to feel that excitement, and it's really cool. And then we kind of left it at that. I didn't get into more than that. I didn't really,
Hans, how did you know to stop?
I just felt like I didn't have, I felt like it wasn't the right place to go into, okay, let's talk about sex or let's talk about something mature. Let's talk about intercourse. Like those, I knew that wasn't the right time and the place to talk about it with them. but I really did want to normalize. I'm going to use the word normalize, even though that kind of makes me uncomfortable.
How about if we use the word affirm?
Affirm. I like that a lot.
Validating.
Right. Let's just affirm them.
I wanted to just affirm that they were having a really cool reaction that we all have in life, and that at some point becomes or can become really dark and painful and heavy, as opposed to, wow, that felt really cool. Like those butterflies were amazing. I love feeling those butterflies. It's really neat. And yes, I wanted to affirm what they were feeling. And it was cool to be able to do so. And I'm really grateful that I've had enough conversations with people around me to be able to have said that at that point and affirm them instead of cast some dark shadow on it and make them start to go into possibly the shame and the pain that I felt when I was a kid and had those kind of reactions.
Thank you, Hans.
It honestly kind of makes me a bit emotional hearing that kids can have, like, there can be a different pathway for kids, that they can have a totally different experience and that they can be validated and that affirmed in those moments. And it's no different than all the other places and ways we validate our kids all the time. Of like, you worked so hard on that art project. Oh, I loved seeing your hustle out on the soccer field. Oh, like, we do it all the time. And I love seeing how you did. It was no different in that moment, despite your I always say you tolerated your discomfort for their growth. And I think that's beautiful.
Thanks, Chris.
Can we talk a little bit about that transition from having it be like this, the butterflies and something that's new and exciting, into something that's being dark and shameful and dreadful and terrible? Like that, to me, that this is like it's one of the cruxes of the issue here. Like at some point in your life, you go from discovering something that makes you feel pleasure and makes you feel like awake and alive, and we attach it to, like, I remember in my upbringing, it was like, we don't look at this, we don't touch ourselves in this way, it's not something that we do. And then I started getting messages from church that were like, this is it's pernicious, it's vile, it's like a drug, it will corrupt you, it will take over your life, it will destroy your relationships. And I remember having this message in my head that, like, I was like a ticking time bomb. You know, I had visions in my head of, like, if I get married, if I marry somebody, and I like slip up and I look at pornography or I masturbate, is my whole life gonna fall apart? Like, am I gonna turn into a rapist? Am I gonna turn into an abuser? Am I going to be like, am I this evil, dark, sinister, horrible person? And it scared me.
How old were you, Nate, when these thoughts started becoming part of your...
I was a teenager.
Okay. So this is before you graduated high school.
Yeah, I got pretty depressed as a high school student, in large part because I felt like I was keeping this secret. And then as I got into my 20s...
Yeah, I want to interrupt for a minute, because men say this a lot. I felt depressed because I was keeping a secret. I like to sort of see if there's another way to think about that.
Yeah, please.
Because I think what you were saying is you felt depressed because you were alone and not connected.
That's an interesting reframe, yeah.
Secrets keep us alone, but secrets don't cause us to feel depressed.
Yeah.
What causes us to feel depressed is we're feeling alone, isolated, and without connections that are meaningful and honest. So I'm wondering if that's, I just wonder how that feels to you, Nate, to think about that time in your life. You're an adolescent.
Yeah.
And this is making you feel alone and separate. And you're a connector. Look what you're doing here. Look what you do in life. You're a connector.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm trying to imagine what that would have been like for you to be such an inherently social human being, to be thwarted from who you centrally are as a person. I'm going to propose that was more powerful than having a sexual secret.
Yeah, Doug, you hit the nail on the head, man. That's like making me emotional hearing you say that back to me, because honestly, I think the most pain that I've ever felt in my life is the pain of loneliness. Mm. And I felt it a lot. And it still haunts me.
Yeah. And Nate, I didn't want that to go unsaid here by hiding behind a secret. This is what I see men do a lot. And so how is this for you? I had no idea we were going to have this conversation.
Me neither. It's good. Like, it's acknowledging something I haven't acknowledged before, that I went through decades of loneliness. And feeling like if I could ever take that veil of loneliness down, it would mean my metaphorical death. It would mean I could never have what I wanted, ever. So I had to choose between living a life of loneliness and maybe having a life with like a wife and a family and the things that I really wanted, or I could share myself with the world and be judged and condemned and seen as like an evil person that people would stay away from, because I was like a leper in the biblical days where you had to walk around jingling a bell. This man has looked at pornography. I would hear talks at church of, counseling girls, the young single women, don't marry a guy who struggles with pornography.
Yep.
I would hear stories from friends of like, I told my wife that I've been struggling with porn and she filed for divorce without even having a conversation. And I was just like, it was more just like Jake. It reinforced, I need to keep this a secret. I needed to keep this a secret. And I was so lonely. I didn't get married until my 30s. And I think I probably could have gotten married earlier. I'm glad I got married to the woman I got married to. Absolutely. But I think part of the reason that I put it off for so long is because I was alone and I was scared to let my guard down. And on top of that, I felt out of control. There were moments in my life where not only did I feel alone, but my consumption of sexual imagery or pornography I felt like I couldn't control it. And Derek made a comment on here earlier on the chat. He said, not everybody's an addict, but that's the only mainstream approach I've been aware of before this discussion. And it's true. Like, when you feel like you can't control what you're doing, the only word that I had access to was an addict, but the way that we use addiction, the word addiction in our culture, it's like, I can be addicted to pizza, I can be addicted to Oreos, I can be addicted to The Office, and I can be addicted to heroin. And the word addiction means different things in different circumstances. Your addiction to the TV show The Office and addiction to heroin, like, those are very different things. And when you say you're addicted to porn, like, what is it? Is it the Oreo addiction or is it the heroin addiction?
I'm going to add another kind of thought here. When the word addiction is inserted in the conversation, I call it premature evaluation. Because Derek said it so well. It's the only words we have.
Yep.
So you tell your children at 3 to use their words when they want something, right? Use your words, honey. Don't point, right? I mean, this is basic human communication. Well, if the only words you have is porn addiction, then those are the words you'll use. That doesn't mean you're describing what's happening. Yeah. All it means it's the words you know.
And can I offer something here? And please interject, Doug or Jake or Hans, of when we're
can I just check in? This is Nate. How are you doing? Can I just do that for 1 second? We never expected this to happen, right?
No, that's why.
So how are you, Nate? Before we moved.
Great, Doug. I'm great. I feel better now than when we started this conversation. Okay. Thank you for therapizing me.
No. That's a conversation. Don't do that.
I know. Okay, so let me
talking and you had a feeling.
And let me position this for the people who are watching. Part of the reason that we're having these conversations, this is the first of many to come, is that this is a process for all of us. And we want to show you what it looks like to have these conversations in a way that isn't inflammatory and it doesn't revolve around anger. And it's okay if I don't want to rob you of that experience. Like, you can be angry, but part of this is like showing you what it looks like to go through this.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not putting on a show for you here. Like, I'm still in the middle of this. I still feel shame. I still have struggles from time to time. And like, I am learning and I'm going through this with you. And I just felt like this is something that people are dealing with enough in the world that it's important to show people what it's like to heal and to move forward and to move towards a healthier space.
Yep.
I do need to step away and blow my nose, though.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but my heart just wanted to close that note before.
No, that's why I really like the space of these honest conversations, and being in it is authentic people, not produced and polished. And I'm really glad you stepped in and asked that. As I'm listening to everybody, I come from a place of systems and the messaging, and I look at like, okay, we talked about our family systems and maybe the messages we got. Sometimes not talking about sex is a message. Saying nothing at all is a message of like, oh, and that doesn't even have to be said, it gets picked up on.
Yeah.
And then I distinctly remember when we're talking about why is this a problem or why is it scary? This is so subtle, but there can be a belief that there's not a moral floor. And when you're sitting in a church discussion and it's like, yes, we're talking about pornography, and remember, Ted Bundy killed people or looked at pornography before he killed people. That's scary. That gets another message. Then go to contextual of Utah, where Utah is the first state to declare that pornography is a public health crisis. Simultaneously, we're one of the worst air places in the world, but we're going to declare that pornography is a public health crisis. This is a lot of messages next to this is a drug and we have got to fight it now. Like, fight it, and either you're against it or you're for it. What side are you on? And I think we can really underestimate the messages that we pick up on. And to Doug's point, like the language we absorb and how we make sense of the experiences we're having. And if we don't have adults or friends or other people to help us make sense of these, what can feel like abstract experiences, sexuality can be abstract unless it's mirrored. The mirrors that we are having held up around us of is you can become a killer, and everything's porn. In the state of Utah, if you go look at the definition of porn, there is no definition, but we've legislated around it. And the best we've gotten by one of our senators is, well, we don't need a definition because I know it when I see it. Well, that's really hard. That's hard to have a conversation about. And so I just want to kind of reiterate these. Why is such a problem?
Kristen, can you unpack one little phrase you said that I think is a gem that I don't hear many people speak of? And I really want you to just take a little more time with it. And that's this terror of not having a moral floor.
Yeah.
Can you speak more about that?
Well, so let's go over to the drugs. And we hear like gateway drug, like this was the beginning. And if you stick with this, you are going to end up being heavily addicted to hardcore drugs. Like, it's a very linear process, and this is just the beginning. And we talk about, I'm going to use the word pornography, but knowing that that's a very big term, but we view that as...
It's like the word food.
It
You've got Chinese food, Mexican food, you've got steak.
In there.
Yeah.
But that it's the beginning of the end, and that there's no moral floor. And if you start looking at pornography as a kid, ultimately where you're going to land is you're going to either molest children and look at child porn. You could become a serial killer. And that there's no like one thing is going to lead you to another, and you need something more and more extreme.
It'll take you, you'll start hiring escorts or getting happy endings. Yeah. You'll start betraying your partner. There's all sorts
of morals go
eventualities.
Out the door. All morals, you become a moralless being. And that's not actually been my experience at all. One of the things I help couples do is when they come in and they're like, we have a problem with pornography, we deconstruct it. And when I ask the partner, do you know what they're looking at? And that most will say actually no. And they will be very nervous or hesitant because of the narrative of, I don't think I want to know, because I don't want to be introduced to the possible monster that I built my life with.
Monster.
And then
what happens when they do find out? Yeah.
it's a pretty powerful experience for actually all parties, because you find there's definitely a moral floor. And I know Doug and I could go into the science and research, and Doug can expand and bring.
Oh, that's far too dumb for this conversation today, Kristen.
We'll get there eventually.
Our wheelhouse. This is our wheelhouse.
It is very reassuring, and there's almost a sense of relief, and it actually makes room for conversation. And I do not want to minimize. Everyone has different experiences with their relationship with visual sexual imagery. I don't want to minimize that, but there are experiences where partners, and I'm going to just do cisgender women and heterosexual men, are like, really? That's it? That's what you're looking at?
That's word for word what my wife said.
Like, that's it. And I just hold that, but it opens up conversations. And then you can get to the feeling in the heart of it, Nate, of like, where they're like, there's more to it than I'm a deviant man without morals. And anyway, I just, these messages that get internalized, I can only imagine. I've almost got a 12-year-old son. He's right at the stage where developmentally, we know they're absorbing a lot of messages. I am sorry for my dog barking, but it's better to tolerate her barking than me yelling at her to not bark. But he's right at a stage where he's going to absorb a lot of messages. I can only imagine what it would be like for him to absorb that he could become a serial killer or do something really harmful to somebody if he's looking at these images, and then he doesn't have anyone to talk to about that, and carrying that. That's a lot.
So I want to really reinforce this message, Kristen, in my experience of sitting with men in therapy groups.
Yeah.
Right. And I have had men walk into the groups. You ran groups in San Diego for 25 years of men who were coming voluntarily to come to therapy and meet with other men in a group therapy setting to talk about feeling out of control sexually. And I remember some of the most painful nights is a man would walk in the room and say, I can't believe this, but my wife, these are heterosexual men with children, cis guys, who would walk in the room and say, they were crestfallen. They were just so demoralized. And they said, last night my wife was concerned I would molest our kids because I watched porn.
Oh man.
And it was a serious conversation. And the man sat in the room and sobbed and felt like, does she even know me? Does she even have any sense of who I am as a human being on the planet? It was so disorienting, so demoralizing for this man. And yet I also have empathy for the wife, because this is what they've been told. And this is what happens. And it rips people who love each other apart. So I cannot affirm this enough. The idea of no moral floor, just dehumanizes people trying to figure this out.
Nate, I don't know if you're taking notes about what we want to talk about in future sessions.
Out of the moment.
Not at the moment, obviously. But
I'm sorry.
Now, the other thing we get to let Nate do is if he just wants to cry, he can cry. He doesn't have to do anything. He can just cry.
I would like to give this much context. Normally, I've never had this experience before. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I had my first child 5 weeks ago.
This is Sleepless Brain, by the way.
I got a good night's sleep last night. I got a really good night's sleep last night, but I just can't imagine hurting her. And like the experience, I can't imagine the experience of having my wife walk up to me and say, hey, because of some stuff that you've done in the past, I can't trust you with our kids because I'm afraid you're going to hurt them like this. And I just think about The love of a father is new to me. Like, I've only experienced it for a couple weeks. And I can't imagine anybody hurting my child, especially me, is intentionally like that. And it just makes me sick to my stomach. It just caused like a really visceral reaction from me to just imagine myself in the position of that client that you just shared. Somebody who's like alone. And then on top of that, has the person that they love most in the world tell them that they can't be trusted with their own children because they're afraid they'll hurt them. Like, that's just so heavy. That's so much. Yeah. Oh man, that just really hit me really hard. Oh,
Nate, you're doing a beautiful job, and I really appreciate your honesty and letting us in on what the tears are about. It's so beautiful, but at the same time, there's people watching your generosity and sharing your humanity right now that give credence to the idea of how painful it is to have the person you love consider you capable of that behavior solely based on the fact that you look sexual imagery.
Oh man, I did not expect to like be in this place today.
Remember one of the decisions we made, just to give even a little bit more context, we did record a couple of pilot podcast episodes. We're like, you know what? The magic is in the raw conversations that are happening. What would happen if we just are willing to just be in a room and see what comes out of it? And so, Nate, I echo what Doug is saying. Thanks for being willing to trust what we've been able to trust behind the scenes with an audience, because I think it's priceless.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, we can go back to the conversation.
What were you going to say, Hans?
I didn't say. Doug, thanks for approaching Nate in that manner. I'm self-conscious now that I didn't in that manner.
You're a good man.
Hans, that's not Hans. You get to be Hans in the room. I get to be Doug. That's what Doug does in the room. You get to be you.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Nate. I think what I was thinking is, and I was not feeling it as deeply as you were, but my thoughts were going back to my 8-year-old kid and thinking, now I might get emotional. How grateful I am that I didn't put a moral judgment on him having a physical reaction to a sexual image. I am really grateful that I didn't cast that on him at that point. And I don't know at what point that starts to develop, but I'm fascinated by that thought. And I would love to explore that in our group of how do we go from the 8-year-old boy who had a cool experience seeing something that excited him in his body to where we're at now. And anyway, it was, I would love to note that for future. If we have time and space to talk about it in one of our conversations, I'm really interested by that.
For sure.
Hans, you just showed men watching this a really important skill. And that is to be able to feel proud of your sexual health conversations.
We've talked about that before, and I love the idea of becoming more skilled at these conversations with myself and with my partner and with my kids, and just figuring out how to do that where I'm at and where everyone else is at is really incredible. And to be able to do it in a room with people like Nate and Jake and Doug and Chris, where we can share this kind of emotion, I really have butterflies right now thinking about being able to go through these conversations with you guys.
Yeah.
It's an honor. I really appreciate it.
And I really can't emphasize the idea and the truth of this being a skill. It is a matter of starting to get new language and opportunities to try out conversations and spaces where we can practice. Because most people don't grow up having any kind of guidance or mentorship or opportunity to develop the skill of it.
Yeah.
And Kristen, just to put a point on that, what's the it? The skill of what?
Thank you, Doug. The skill of talking about sex and having sexual health conversations.
Thank you.
And it's not just sexual health conversations about what we want to do, the behavior of it. If we're watching this conversation, there's relationships, there's emotions, there's so much to sexual health conversations. And I think that's why it's not just, how do we talk about sex? There's so much more than just the behavioral aspect of it. That is one piece. That's component. But there's so much more.
All right, everybody. I think we've kind of hit a time cap here, and I feel like we're kind of wrapping up to a natural conclusion of this specific conversation. But I want to put a bow on it by telling anybody who's watching right now that this is just an introduction. Like, the purpose of this call was to set the stage for the future conversations that we plan to have, where we're going to walk you, now that we've kind of, I've cried my eyes out enough to put a point on the fact that this can be a really painful thing for people to experience. I think that the stories that Jake and Hans shared today were really powerful. And they set a great stage of the fact that, like, this is something that people are dealing with. It's a real thing. It's a hard thing. It's an emotional thing. It's a lonely thing. And it causes people genuine pain and confusion. And I hope that you have a little bit of hope after listening to this, that if you can stay tuned in and come back, that we're going to start showing you how to, or modeling how to wade through these complex waters of reaching a place that I think, Doug, I don't know if you would echo this description, but like a place of sexual health, like where we feel a sense of hope and a sense of health and reassurance and happiness and a sense of groundedness of where we're at in this journey. And we want you to come along with us. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please come back, share it with your friends. And then inside the Facebook group, and I believe on the YouTube page, if you're streaming on YouTube, we have links to a forum that you can click on where you can submit questions or share your story. And we're going to be trying to model these future conversations based off of the needs and the desires and the struggles that you are having as well as listeners. So thank you for participating in this conversation. Does anybody else want to wrap up with anything, or is that?
It was a great wrap up, Nate.
Okay. Well, then we will be back in a week with another conversation where I will cry less.
Don't do that.
All right, guys. Thanks for being on the call.